thousand. But when you looked at all the suppliers involved and the economies, you could have seen another couple million jobs lost that would have had huge implications for the economy. Now GM is actually making a profit and starting to buy or starting to hire people back. But one thing we need to do is make sure that those cars are made here in the United States. The second thing we need to do is to create the electricity grid, what we're calling the smart grid, which is, think about it. Part of the reason that we can drive our cars is because there's a gas station every so often. There are roads, there's gas stations. We know how to fuel up our automobiles. Now, if we want to have everybody getting maximum use out of an electric car or a hybrid car, part of what we have to do is to create a similar distribution mechanism for electricity. And one of the exciting things about these hybrids is we want to get to the point where you've got what's called a plug-in hybrid, where you essentially have a gas station at your house called your electric socket. And you're going to be able to plug in your car at night. Some of the energy that was stored in the car can actually go back into the house, and then when you're ready to go, you can get that energy and use it to drive. But to do all that, you need a better electricity grid. We've got kind of a creaky infrastructure when it comes to electricity, and that's one of the major investments that we want to start making. And that, by the way, is an investment that only government, working with the private sector, can help to make. You know, you're hearing a lot of talk these days about government. And government's terrible, and bureaucrats, and they're taking over, and all this stuff. Look, I don't want government any more than is necessary, but there are some things that Bob or any CEO can invest in. Bob's not going to build the roads to get to Selgard. No company is going to make investments for a public good. None of you would expect a private company to fund our military or our firefighters. There are just some things that you can't do on your own, and the private sector is not going to do. It's not profitable, because if Bob was the guy who had to build the road, he'd have a whole bunch of other people driving on that road that weren't paying for it. So it's not a good investment for him. That's where government comes in. The same is true when it comes to something like the electricity grid. We're going to have to help create that infrastructure, just like broadband lines, just like a whole bunch of basic 21st century infrastructure, so we've got the platform in order to succeed and compete economically. That's what the Chinese are doing. That's what the Indians are doing. That's what the Germans are doing. That's what the United States is going to have to do. All right? I've got time for a couple more questions. I can already see this is my guy Reggie Love from Charlotte, North Carolina, by the way. Yeah. He already told me he's not getting on the plane going back. He's spending the weekend here. All right. I think I should. Let's see. I want to make sure that I've got to get a woman in here. Make sure that it's balanced. All right. This young lady right there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mm-hmm. We're honored to have you here today. I'm Joyce Ravis from Lake Wiley, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. I work at Selgard. We have wonderful CEOs that take care of us and have really helped the company grow. My question is, though, in the economy times that we have now, is it a wise decision to add more taxes to us with the health care? Because we are overtaxed as it is.
Well, let's talk about that. Because this is an area where there's been just a whole lot of misinformation. And I'm going to have to work hard over the next several months to clean up a lot of the misapprehensions that people have. Here's the bottom line. Number one is that we have been up until last week, the only advanced country that allows 15 million of its citizens to not have any health insurance, and the vast majority of those folks work. It's just that they don't happen to work for a company that is either big enough or generous enough to provide them any coverage. So that's point number one. There is a moral imperative that is important. Number two, you don't know who might end up being in that situation. See, those of us who have health care right now ask ourselves, well, is this something that should be a priority right now? But anybody here who lost their job and then COBRA ran out, or COBRA wasn't subsidized the way the Recovery Act made sure COBRA paid 65% of the cost of COBRA, and if you had somebody at home who was sick or you had a child who got sick, you'd suddenly say to yourself, well, now I see the need. And so part of what we have to do is always say to ourselves, there, but for the grace of God go I. And have a basic safety net. So that's point number two. Point number three is that the way insurance companies have been operating, even if you've got health insurance, you don't always know what you got. Because what has been increasingly the practice is that if you're not lucky enough to work for a big company that is a big pool, this essentially is almost a self-insurer, then what's happening is that you're going out on the marketplace, you may be buying insurance, you think you're covered, but then when you get sick, they decide to drop the insurance right when you need it. Or when you get sick, they try to find what's they consider to be a pre-existing condition that would justify them canceling your policy. Or there's some fine print in there where you've got a lifetime limit, and it turns out you thought you had coverage, but it turns out the coverage only goes up to a certain point, and then afterwards you have to start paying out of pocket. And even after paying all those premiums, you're now in the hole for $100,000 or $200,000, and you're going bankrupt or losing your house. And the final point is that the cost of health care, setting aside anything we did in reform, I mean, if we just allowed the current trajectory to go on, is out of control. Now, I haven't talked to Bob about what his costs are looking like for Celgard employees, but I can tell you that health care costs have gone up. The price of health care has gone up 3 times faster than wages. So either the company is having to swallow those costs, which means that's less money that they could use for hiring new workers or investing in new plants and equipment, or they're passing on those costs to their employees in the form of higher premiums, higher deductibles, higher copayments. And what's happening federally is because the costs are so out of control, all the programs that we already have, Medicare, Medicaid, the Children's Health Insurance Program, all those things are completely out of control. So if you're concerned about the deficit, what you're really concerned about is the cost of Medicare, Medicaid, and all the other programs that are already in place. So here's what we did. What we said is, number one, we'll have the basic principle that everybody gets coverage. And the way we're going to do that is to say that most people individually shouldn't buy health insurance on their own because they have no leverage and the insurance companies take advantage of it. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a big pool, a marketplace, that allows everybody to buy into this pool that members of Congress, by the way, will be a part of, so you know it's going to be a good deal. Because members of Congress, you know, they've got to look out for their own families. They wouldn't vote for it if it wasn't going to be a good deal. And just like Walmart is able to leverage a really good price from its suppliers for everything because they're such a big purchaser, well, this pool will be a big purchaser, and it will be able to get a better deal from insurance companies. So that's point number one. That will drive down the prices for people who are participating, and it will allow everybody to get a decent deal on insurance. And what we do is we provide tax credits to people who still can't afford it so that they can afford it. That's point number one. Point number two is we've got the strongest insurance reforms in history. So all those things I told you about, you not being able to get insurance because of a pre-existing condition, you finding yourself getting dropped, even though you've been paying premiums for 15 years and suddenly they just decide, sorry, we don't want you because you're getting sick, those policies will be over. And so you will be protected as a consumer to make sure you've got security and protection if you've got insurance already. That's the second thing we do. The third thing we do is we actually put in place a whole bunch of mechanisms to start reducing the actual cost of health care.